Nathan Walker had always loved the freedom his career as a pilot gave him. The long flights, the distant cities, the hours spent in the air, everything about it felt like an adventure. His wife, Sarah, was understanding of the demands of his job. They had been together for 6 years, married for 3, and while Nathan's schedule kept him away from home often, they made it work. But lately, something had felt off. It wasn't anything he could put his finger on exactly. It started as small, inconsequential things. He noticed that Sarah was always on her phone when he got home, texting or chatting with someone. He didn't think much of it at first, she was just trying to pass the time, right? After all, she often told him how lonely she felt while he was away. But the distance started to feel more pronounced. The warm greetings when he walked through the door turned into quick pecks on the cheek. The late nights she spent up in bed reading or watching TV turned into long silences, and soon he found himself more alone in his own home than he had ever been before. At first, Nathan shrugged it off. It was just his mind playing tricks on him. He was gone so often, Sarah must just be feeling the absence. But then, he began to notice other things. Things that couldn't easily be dismissed. One evening, Nathan arrived home early from a domestic flight. He was exhausted from the trip, but when he walked into the house, it was eerily quiet. Sarah wasn't in the living room, the kitchen, or even the bedroom. It wasn't like her not to greet him after he came home. His first instinct was to call out her name. Sarah? He heard a faint voice answer from the upstairs. He didn't think much of it, but as he walked through the hallway, he noticed her phone on the kitchen counter, face up. It was buzzing with a message, the name, Ryan, flashing across the screen. Nathan froze. He knew of all of Sarah's friends. Ryan wasn't one of them. He hesitated for a moment, torn between the rational part of his mind telling him not to jump to conclusions, and the nagging feeling deep in his gut that something was wrong. But curiosity won out. Nathan grabbed the phone and opened the message. Can't wait to see you again. I miss you. His heart stopped. He didn't recognize the number, but the tone was clear. It wasn't a message from a friend. And it sent a jolt of panic straight through him. Sarah? Nathan called again, his voice more insistent this time. He could feel his pulse quicken, a sense of dread rising in his chest. A few moments later, Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs. Her eyes widened when she saw him holding her phone, the tension in the air almost tangible. What are you doing with my phone, Nathan? She asked, her voice tight. Nathan felt a knot form in his stomach. Who's Ryan? He asked, keeping his voice even despite the storm brewing inside him. Sarah's face shifted from shock to defensiveness. She quickly walked over and snatched the phone from his hand. It's nothing. Just a friend from work. You have no reason to be looking through my things. But Nathan wasn't convinced. I don't think that's just a friend. It's more than that, isn't it, Sarah? Sarah stood there, frozen for a moment, before a nervous laugh escaped her lips. You're being paranoid. It's just a text. I'm sorry if it upset you, but you know how stressful things have been with you gone so often. Nathan's eyes narrowed, his suspicions now growing into certainty. That's not an answer, Sarah. She looked away, biting her lip, avoiding his gaze. I don't know what you want me to say, Nathan. I didn't want to hurt you. I swear, it's nothing. But Nathan could see the guilt in her eyes. He had been married long enough to know when someone was lying to him. Something wasn't right, and Sarah's reassurances weren't enough to calm the storm brewing inside him. That night, Nathan couldn't sleep. The message from Ryan kept replaying in his mind, over and over. How long had this been going on? Was it a one-time thing, or was this an affair that had been going on behind his back for weeks, months even? Nathan had always been a man who prided himself on trusting his wife, but now his trust had been shattered. The quiet evenings they'd spent together, the phone calls, the unexplained absences, they were all adding up in a way that he couldn't ignore anymore. The woman he thought he knew, the woman he had married, now felt like a stranger to him. He was a man of action, and he wasn't going to let this slide. But at the same time, he wasn't sure how to move forward. Confronting Sarah seemed like the obvious choice, but Nathan didn't want to act out of anger or hurt. He needed proof, he needed answers, and most importantly, he needed to know the truth. So he made a decision. He would keep his suspicions to himself for now. He wouldn't let Sarah know that he knew. But he would watch, and he would wait for the moment when the truth could no longer be hidden. The next day, Nathan took his next flight, leaving his suspicions behind him. But the gnawing feeling in his chest didn't leave. He could no longer ignore the feeling that everything he had worked for, his marriage, his trust, was slowly slipping away from him. And when he returned home, he knew things would never be the same again. Nathan spent the next few days trying to maintain some sense of normalcy, but his thoughts kept returning to the text messages from Ryan. The nagging feeling in his stomach wouldn't go away. He tried to push it aside, focusing on his work and the long flights that kept him away from home. But it was becoming impossible to ignore. That evening, after a long flight from New York, Nathan arrived home later than usual. He expected to find Sarah and Lily, their daughter, getting ready for bed. But when he opened the door, the house was eerily quiet. It was just after 8 p.m., and Lily's bedtime was always around 7:30. "Sarah?" Nathan called, stepping inside. No answer. His heart began to race as a sense of unease settled over him. He knew something was off. His gut told him that whatever had been happening with Sarah wasn't over yet. He quickly walked upstairs to their bedroom, hoping to find Sarah or at least some explanation, but as he passed Lily's room, he heard soft voices coming from downstairs. He stopped dead in his tracks. The voices were too low to make out, but one of them was unmistakably Sarah's. The other was unfamiliar, a man's voice. Nathan's blood ran cold as he quietly moved to the top of the stairs, his pulse pounding in his ears. He couldn't hear the conversation clearly, but the tone was unmistakable. There was laughter, a closeness that Nathan had never heard between Sarah and anyone else. The other voice was intimate, familiar, like they had shared moments that Nathan had never been part of. He could feel the floor beneath him like it was sinking into the ground. He was sure now. The situation was worse than he thought. He had to face the reality. Sarah had been seeing someone else, and tonight, she was with him. Without thinking, Nathan descended the stairs, the familiar creak of the steps announcing his arrival. The conversation stopped abruptly, and the silence that followed felt suffocating. When he reached the living room, Sarah was standing near the window, her back to him. There was another man beside her. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket. He had his back to Nathan, but as soon as he turned, Nathan recognized him. It was Ryan, the man from the text messages. Nathan's heart beat like a drum in his chest, his mind screaming at him to turn around, to leave the room, but his feet wouldn't move. He stood there, frozen, staring at the two of them. "Ryan, what the hell is going on?" Nathan's voice came out low, almost a whisper, filled with disbelief and rage. Sarah immediately stepped forward, her face pale as if she had seen a ghost. "Nathan, this isn't what it looks like." "I saw the messages, Sarah," Nathan interrupted, his voice thick with emotion. "I know what's been going on. I know about you and him. Don't try to deny it anymore." Ryan stepped forward, holding up his hands in defense. "Nathan, man, it's not what you think. We didn't." But Nathan was no longer interested in his excuses. His mind was racing, the walls closing in as the truth settled in like a bitter pill. "You don't get to tell me what to think. You've been sleeping with my wife for months. I want you out of my house. Now." Ryan's face flushed, and he looked to Sarah, who seemed unable to speak. The weight of Nathan's words hung in the air as Ryan turned to leave. "Don't come back," Nathan said coldly. As Ryan walked out the door, Nathan finally turned to face Sarah. Her tears were already falling, but Nathan wasn't sure how he felt anymore. Anger? Sadness? Betrayal? "I'm sorry, Nathan. I didn't know how to stop it. It happened," she whispered, her voice breaking. Nathan felt a twinge of regret as he looked at her, but that wasn't enough to forgive her. "You had plenty of chances to stop it, Sarah. And you didn't." He walked toward the door, his chest tight with emotions he didn't know how to deal with. As he stepped outside into the cold night air, he needed space, and he needed answers. The pain was too fresh. He couldn't look at her anymore, not right now. Nathan didn't go far. He only needed to clear his mind, to take a breath and think. But the events of the night played over in his head, each moment more painful than the last. Sarah's betrayal wasn't just about the affair, it was the lies, the deception. It felt like she had been living in a parallel world, one where Nathan didn't exist. As he walked down the street near their house, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry it had to end this way, but I'm not the only one involved." Nathan stopped dead in his tracks, rereading the message. He recognized the number. It was from Sarah's phone. His pulse quickened as he realized what it meant. This wasn't just about Ryan. There was more. Nathan's mind raced as he turned back toward the house, determined to confront Sarah again. But as he reached the front door, he saw a car pull up, another unfamiliar one. A woman stepped out, someone Nathan had never seen before. She looked around nervously, checking over her shoulder before she walked toward the house. The woman knocked on the door, and Sarah opened it, her expression one of panic and guilt. As Sarah ushered the woman inside, Nathan stood frozen. It was clear now, there was more to this than just one affair. His wife wasn't just betraying him with Ryan. She had been leading a double life, and it wasn't just Ryan she was involved with. Nathan couldn't wait any longer. His heart was pounding in his ears as he marched to the door and threw it open. Sarah's eyes widened when she saw him, and for the first time, he saw genuine fear in her eyes. "Nathan, please," she began, but Nathan raised his hand, cutting her off. "Who is she?" Nathan demanded, his voice thick with disbelief. The woman stepped forward, looking ashamed. "I'm Jessica," she said quietly. I'm so sorry. I didn't know about you. I didn't know you were married." Nathan's heart slammed in his chest. 2 affairs. 2 lies. His wife had been living a life completely separate from him. His trust had been shattered in a way he never thought possible. "Get out," Nathan said, his voice calm but filled with cold fury. "Both of you. Now." As Jessica and Ryan both left the house, Nathan stood there, shaking. He couldn't believe what was happening. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from beneath him, leaving him in freefall. "Why, Sarah?" Nathan asked, his voice quieter now, the anger simmering into sadness. "Why did you do this?" She looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know, Nathan. I've been confused. I thought I was unhappy, and then I met them, and I don't know. I'm sorry. But I didn't want to lose you." Nathan's mind raced, but there were no more words to say. He couldn't fix this. He couldn't forgive this. It was over. "Just go," he said quietly, his voice hollow. "I can't do this anymore."